Hi, good afternoon. It's January 30th, the day before my birthday. You can send cards, you can send gift certificates, whatever you want to do. Send me good wishes. And I won't tell you how old I am. I probably look older than I actually am, but in either case, it's pretty old. At any rate, I'm trying to keep moving up my videoing calendar with this class so that you can have the material from me sooner than I gave you the first week. And so I was grabbing some time now to walk you through week 3. Up to now, everything seems to be pretty good. I really like the discussion responses. I like that you're speaking to each other well. And as much as I understand the 21st century educational changes that have to be put in place, this course, after all, is about change, isn't it? Uh, Asynchronous throws me for a little bit because it doesn't give me the way I would like to have to get you to be really rocking and rolling and working with each other in all different ways that we're not able to do because of the expectation of the how the course is configured. So the discussion questions in many senses is the at least for now is the engagement issue that has the most requirement. If you ever looked at some data about, and I'll probably put this up when I remember to in the next couple of weeks when we talk more specifically about instruction. Bethel Labs, Bethel Labs. You can look it up in Google. Has a great graphic that shows the retention of learning, stepping up from the bottom of a triangle, where basically teachers lecture what I'm doing to you now, unfortunately, and steps it up to the top of the triangle. When you talk about the bottom of the triangle, that is to say, lecturing, straight lecture, when there's nothing expected at all of the learner except to write down whatever the professor or teacher is saying, has something like a 5%, hear that, a 5% retention rate after 6 weeks. So maybe you learn enough of it to get through the test. That's a week from now, but it certainly isn't long lasting. It's not embedded into your thinking soul, so to speak. Now, in contrast, and you can look at the whole triangle. I will pull it up when I remember to show it to you if you don't remember to do it for yourself. But the most effective is when people are engaged. Right now, we're talking about a 90% retention rate when people are interacting with each other, exchanging ideas, doing things together, constructing things together, and so forth. And there's all kinds of differences of levels of teaching strategies in between the base of the triangle and the tip. So, enough said. Guess I'm making a face as I speak to you, but that's what we're kind of constrained to do, at least now. That's why I really need to see you do some great things with the discussion questions, and I think that you are. What I'm going to do is really 3 things now. I'm going to put this learning agenda into the modules, into Canvas, probably as soon as I get the rest of this video recorded to YouTube and posted as well. In fact, I'm going to do is probably put the link from YouTube onto this agenda so you have two things in the same place. But I'll show it to you now. And then we'll do some housekeeping. And by the way, if you have any kind of questions at all, just shoot me an email or send me a text. But in either case, like I know I already said, tell me who you are. I have, oh, wow. I probably have about 50 students all told from 5 different classes, actually. Or is it 4 now? No, it's 5. So there's a lot of people for me to remember. And just say I'm Joe from the 5743 class. Now I'll immediately remember who you are. But if you don't give me that, if someone says, well, what's the discussion question? And I say to myself, okay, which class are you in? That kind of thing just slows us all down. Here are the goals for this week. We start with housekeeping. I already did a little bit of housekeeping by encouraging you to continue to do what you do with the discussion questions and with the journaling, which we'll come to in a moment. We'll review the assignments. One thing I wanted to say, you can see it says guest speakers coming. At the very end of last week's video, I said, it just occurred to me as I was saying it to you. when we started to talk about Finland, I said, hey, maybe I'll bring a guest speaker in. So the answer is I'm going to have not only one guest speaker, but two students whom I had in, one I had in the 8th grade a million years ago. I've had in a couple of courses. She moves up through the ranks, through high school and into college and through her graduate programs, and did her doctoral dissertation under me. And the other lady, I just had in the doctoral classes, and that's not just just. She's remains a good friend. Both of them did dissertations about Finland, the Finnish education system, and one took the aspect of teacher training, and the other took the aspect of administrative training. Then what they also did, I may have mentioned this last week, is they together went to Finland, and apparently there are educational tours you can take. Well, Finnish educators out of the college system will take interested people around and show them not only what they do, but why they do it, their philosophy. And they're a much better position to explain to you what the Finnish system is than I am. So I immediately emailed one of the now doctors as soon as we hung up last week, and she said, anything you want, I will do. And I said, thank you very much. And she got a hold of the other person. So they're both just waiting for me to talk to them. So what I'll do is, I don't know when, hopefully pretty soon, maybe next week, but I don't want to commit them or me to that because I'm really busy this week. But they'll do an interview with me, and we'll be sharing that on a video. And I think that you'll see, you'll learn a lot from it, given that all three of the books that you're responsible for, the Tomlinson book, the Fullen book, and Dr. Koza's own book, all speak to the Finnish system as an exemplar. Some other books I'm going to mention because you need to understand the context, the global context of some of these thinking. But it'll be good. So yes, we have a guest speaker coming, and yes, you have assignments due. This week you have 2 journal articles and I don't know why they spilled together, but they did. And so I decided not to give a discussion question. So you have 2 journal premises, which means you just have to answer them more deeply. All right, but there won't be any discussion question this week. We'll skip over that, and maybe we'll double up on a discussion question down the line when we need to. So there's 2 journal questions. Rather, there's one, actually. I pared that back, actually. Here it is. What roles can the following groups take to build the quality of teaching for the 21st century in the United States? Which presumes you have thought about 21st century education. Don't forget that part. The next piece is, what roles can the following groups take to build the quality of teaching for the 21st century in the United States? And then we have a couple of choices there. I mean, what can the principal do? What can the school district superintendents do? What about higher education? I have some opinions about these things. You might have heard in the tone of my voice as such. So that's your journal question for next week. So there is no discussion question. There is one journal question, and there it is. Give it a good blast. You have 4 or 5 chapters of Fullen under your belt. You have, I think, 3 or 4 chapters of Tomlinson under your belt, and you should be beginning to have begun reading Dr. Koza's book. I'm going to talk about that right now. So you have this assignment, and I haven't got the assignment in front of me, so I can't remember the exact terminology, but if I remember correctly, the book's assigned to you. It's multi-age schooling, and it's a fine book. It speaks to one broad solution, change solution. It's the best way to put it. One broad change solution to the perils and the issues that Fullen and Tomlinson and Hargraves have raised in the other 2 books that you're reading. It's not the only solution. Some of it is, kind of falls together with other things, and that's okay. But you also need to remember that, I'm just pulling up the book for myself. You also need to remember that education sometimes trips over itself and calls one thing X, and then it calls the same thing Y, even though really X and Y are the same thing. And that's what education research is notoriously bad at, for numbers of reasons that you should be aware of, because sometimes you'll say, what's going on here? And that's one of the issues that's at play here. But Dr. Koz's book it has great worth in your thinking about how to change schooling in general, and more specifically, how to convert schooling, ing, to a multi-age classroom approach. And the but at the end of my sentence is it goes a little much deeper than that. And so what you need to realize, first of all, you have to read the book. No way around it, folks. You have to read the book, get the book, read the book, okay? And then the assignment that you're going to have at the end of the semester is to come up with some kind of video presentation, PowerPoint video presentation. I haven't figured out how we're going to do that yet. So the minimum, I'll say right now, a PowerPoint, maybe not a video, where you're going to offer your action plan for implementing one. Now, Dr. Koza does have an implementation template, and last chapter in the book speaks to implementation. I don't think it goes deep enough, really, to help you understand how you can make this your own as prospective administrators. So yeah, you can read it. You have to read it. Yes, of course, you should be using the most salient elements of it. No question about that. But I think we can probably do, along the way, flesh out what that's about. So I'm not going to tell you all of that today because this jumbles up your brains. But what we're going to do is, for the next few minutes anyway, I'll do a summary of the 2 chapters, a minimum, that I think that you should have read by now. And that would have been the preface and chapter 1. And then I'm going to just, depending on how busy I am with other chapters and other material, I'll get to the end of the book myself with you. All right, but I don't want to overload you with too much educational jargonese all that quickly with some of this. But when you read the Koza book, what you need to do is, this book, the purpose of reading the book is for you to convert the idea of the book. Hear that. Convert the idea of the book to implementation, to taking it to the streets. How do you do that? Do you know how to do that? And the answer is that you don't. No offense. Now, I'm not sure what course it's in. Actually, it is in this course, the planning course. And I don't like to talk this way because I'm always embarrassed when I say things like this. But here it comes, and hopefully will be the last time I will say this, because I don't like what I'm going to say. You have a certification exam to take as a building leader, and a similar exam to take if you intend to go forward and get your district leader license, which I totally recommend. Now, in the case of this course and the context of this course within the context of the program that you're in, where you are taking a sort of a double certification, which I didn't know straight away. I just was told this about a week ago, where you have, and actually I picked it up from your discussion questions. It's the first place I heard it. No one told me in advance. I'm really happy that you did tell me that. I happen to have taught in that program, the ENL School Building Leader License double certification program when I first started. And I was pretty good at it. I was very successful at it, if I'm not mistaken. I got some people who could testify to that. And so in your case, if you're trying to get licenses to administer these programs, to meet the needs of a special, that's the wrong word, a different population, I'm not even sure that's the right word, a growing population of metropolitan area schools, whether it would be in the city or in the surrounding areas, where we're putting programs in place, it's imperative that you have the skills, the leadership skills, to turn these things into reality. And it's not as though you can just snap your fingers on that. Now, to come back to the certification exam, there is a question. I'm going to call it an essay question. There is a question on the test, all right, that requires that you show how you're going to implement a change and how you're going to implement the change based on a series of steps. I will take you through those steps. I will walk you through the entire thing. Don't go ahead and write an action plan up until you let me start doing my thing with you and for you. But the substance of what you're talking about is Dr. Coase's principles, LES principles that need to be put in place. So let me make that sound simpler. You're in a program where you are going to be put in charge of enacting E&L programs for the improvement and serving the needs of a needy population. That's going to be your charge when you get these licenses. There's the test that you won't pass if you don't know how to show that you know how to do this by way of an action plan. The action plan will be largely based on the COSU book, but not totally. I will walk you through the COSU book, and I will walk you through how to bring this all together, but not right away. Okay, not straight away. We'll do it. Again, I have a habit of overloading students early on, and then everybody gets a rash. So what we'll do is we'll piece it in slowly. So let's get started just with the idea of this book, all right, and then we'll go from there. And I'm taking this straight out of the. And by the way, I love the way Dr. Coase set the book up. She's got scenarios, she's got follow-up questions, and there's lots of good things to do in here. And you should take it upon yourself to teach yourself the book. Teach yourself the themes and principles that go along with it. And one thing that she mentioned is that the lack of grounding research into practice. I'm smiling out of frustration, but also out of understanding. There are research groups, and there are research groups, and there are research groups. There are journals, and there are journals, and there are conferences where someone, old and bald like me, stands up and gives you their theory about how life should be in the prairie, and that's all well and good, except that. But but is, it is all well and good. And can someone please show me how to bring it to the streets? Or can you bring this to the streets, or is this just ivory tower material, as it often is when it comes to educational research? And the trouble is that, well, let me make that a positive. Leaders are really responsible for doing that, for enacting. Here comes a bad word, the four-letter word, enacting theory into practice. He used the T word, theory word. I have a dissertation student. He's writing his chapter 2. There's 5 chapters in a dissertation. The second chapter is a literature review. And I said to the man, "Tell me what your theoretical framework is." And he said to me, "I've been teaching in the city for 26 years. He works in the chancellor's office. So he's up there and he says, "I don't even know what a theory is." So I politely said, "That's all well and good, but that probably means you're using all kinds of theories to get your changes in place, and you don't know what the names of them are." And that's fine if you're using those valid principles to make life better for kids. You don't have to put a name on it if you don't necessarily want to, but it certainly helps. And the trouble is that, and this is a favorite phrase of mine, and it makes some sense, and it will make sense to you when you're running a building or a department. Sometimes you get so mired down in what I call muddling through decision making. So many decision occasions coming at you from left, right, upside down, inside out. You haven't got time to sit down and weigh it against which theory is the best way to approach this. You might go from your gut. We'll go from your gut, and hopefully your gut is aligned with good values and with some good theoretical frames that support those good values. But you're really just repeating what did I do yesterday when the kid threw the pizza across the floor? Oh yeah, I made him stand in the corner, or whatever silly things people do to kids who throw pizza across the floor. What did you do? Oh, I called the parent. And you get so caught up in that, you just keep repeating what you did, unless in repeating what you did, it didn't work. Now, the definition of insanity, according to Einstein, is to continue to do something that doesn't work. That's another conversation. But in the end, Coase was right. Dr. Coase was right. It's unfortunate that schools often, especially leaders, are not as familiar with good leadership practices as you would like to think that they are. Now, she mentions this book is about rethinking how schools should build learning communities. And that's another phrase people talk about and have different ways of putting in place, and without my being too sarcastic. So to quote Harsh, is what we see is that these educators go through the motions for making changes in schools. This goes back to that assignment. I don't want us to go through motion. I want you to create a system, a plan that truly, brings it all together as such. That shows you thought through what it's all about. And she also makes the point too that to recreate schools might mean we have to recreate what we expect a school to do and change our own sensibilities. I used to get in trouble with my assistant principal when I was a social studies teacher because my kids were very loud. That's because they were in the classroom where they were always talking to each other to solve issues together. And he came in and said, "Why don't you just tell them who won the War of 1812?" And I said, "No, we figure it out. And that's how we do it." And I burned somebody at the stake, figuratively speaking, when I'm teaching about Native Americans. All right. Because then the students recognize what that's about, rather than just say, "Oh, the Iroquois killed their captives," which they didn't always do, by the way. So the preface goes on to argue for what she calls multi-age school reform, where the environment's changed, where the classroom walls are open, perhaps, where maybe there's no chairs, or maybe the chairs are arranged in different ways. Maybe there's pods. There's schools out there that do that, but the kids are loud. Can you put up with that? All right. There are plenty of schools, and this is true. And wherever I've gone, I've been in more schools than you can shake a stick at, from different capacities, where there are teachers' manuals. And the truth is, you could be a trained chimpanzee who could read and teach a class if you just read from somebody else's directions. Now ask this question: look left, Johnny. Look right, Mary. If Mary says 2 + 2 is 5, you say, there are manuals like that. Now, what that does is it cheapens the whole profession of instructional excellence, the whole idea of instructional excellence. It cheapens the whole idea of being a teacher. And that goes back to Fulton's book, if you think about it. She also mentions the issue of trust, and she talks about Hoy, Shannon, and Moran, and good people. These are real, true researchers. And I'm not going to beat this to death, but they talk about 6 factors, 6 parts of trust, which is the keystone of what a good school, multi-age school, might be about. I'm not going to read this to you, but it's on page 11. So make a note to yourself to check that out. Oh, by the way, there's politics. Oh, by the way, there's politics. Oh, by the way, there's politics. And we will talk about frames in a couple of weeks. And the political frame is nothing but schools being at the mercy of the world out there, the communities out there, who don't necessarily have the best interest of what a good education is about, or would like to make this a competition for the limited resources that schools have. You hear the word politics all the time. And yes, there is politics. It's pretty much unavoidable. How you navigate that, and especially if you're trying to put in place a multi-age school, is tough things to do. So yeah, then there's a question about how rigorous school curricula should be, given the understanding of what we think students should be able to do in the 21st century. I mean, I went to a restaurant the other day and was really kind of sad that the waiter just didn't have any skills at all. I felt badly for the young man, and we were trying to be kind with him about all the mistakes that he was making. And we were kind. We weren't trying to be kind, but his boss wasn't being real kind about it, and that's unfortunate. Did you know that the big corporations, the ones everybody can name, the Amazons, the Googles, the Microsofts, are so unsatisfied with how students come out of college, let alone high school, are so unsatisfied that they have their own schools to teach their employees not only the skills of creating a laptop, but or how to write software, but all kinds of skills that you wouldn't even think of in order for them to be contributors to the goals of the corporation, because of the failure of the public school system to do that. So Dr. Kozeman goes on to say the real challenge is to ask that all schools educate all students at high levels. You can't argue with that one. Now, she offers the idea of, and this is a key point here in this course, because this is a leadership course, as well as an E&L course, but in this case, the context, it's leadership course. And she talks about multi-age communities as an organizational processes. The structure. We've already talked about the cascading champagne glass fountain versus the spider web. I hope we have. Sometimes I confuse what I say in one class or another. I'll come back to that. And she goes on to say that for a school to be successful, all school communities members must participate in all aspects of making critical decisions, which then talks about not a top-down approach as much as a flattened approach. I use the idea of the cascading champagne fountain in a wedding reception versus the spider, where the spider weaves a web that's not flat on the ground, someplace hanging off a tree or a wall, but it's a flat network, because when the insect flies into the web, whatever part of the web that it gets stuck into, the spider can immediately whip down the other side of the web and grab it because of the vibration of the web, because of the connection among all people. And that talks about coaching and collaboration, true collaboration, not cooperation, collaboration, LABOR, co-working, truly contributing to each other's needs. Which goes on to the point that Dr. Kozin offers the idea that multi-age classroom is also a culture building process. Easy to talk about, much more difficult to do. Should be part of your action plan, actually. And I'll come back to that in my own way in a week or two. And also makes the point that administrators, I used to interview a candidate for an administrative position, I would say, on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is you're a manager, a really great manager, and 10 is that you're a really great instructional leader, where do you sit? Now, almost always they say, "Oh, I'm a 9, or I'm an 8." I'm up, all really typify themselves as leaders, as instructional leaders. And those are the people whom I would look at much more closely to hire than somebody who said they were a 1. I realized later that that's wrong. I shouldn't have phrased the question that way, because all principals, all building leaders, all administrators have to be managers too. They have to make the trains run on time. Making the trains run on time is part of making the school more effective, which makes it more instructionally valid as well. So that's kind of a silly point to consider, but what I need to do is to build, if I'm going to create a culture, I need to create a culture of flattened hierarchy, according to Kozin, and I agree with it totally, in a community of learners. Easy to talk about, hard to do. We'll talk about it as the class rolls on. And as she goes on to say, it needs to be able to concentrate on highly effective instructional strategies. Not what I'm doing right now. It's the opposite of what I'm doing. He said, with embarrassment. Okay? And that goes back to what I mentioned before about the triangle. So she goes on to say, the book's divided into 4 parts. One's about organizational practice, one's about building culture, another one's about the learning processes, another one is about assessment and systemic development. We've already done some of these things in little bits and pieces, but I will come back and drive these points home for you down the line. And that's really where I'm going to keep you right now. I'm really looking just at the preface for a moment, but you should go on to look at the multi-age framework on the organizational change piece, And I'll revisit that next week. So that's the first piece of what we were doing. Remember, I'm trying to plug this number 5 here back into Dr. Koz's book, back into the end of the semester assignment. You're going to write an action plan. I'm going to teach you how to write the action plan. Man alive, am I going to teach you how to write an action plan? It's going to enable you to shape Dr. Koz's book into your needs insofar as ENL babies are concerned. That's my promise to you, as long as you work with me on that. I will say one thing, I just thought of this as I'm saying this to you. It really would be helpful. I'm not sure if you all can do this. I'm just going to put it out there right now. I'll probably think of another way to approach this. If you could get me, each of you, find data, either quantitative data or qualitative data, to show how well ENL's children in your school are learning. That'd be great, because then we can figure out whether there's deficits in what the school is doing to help them learn, or to obstruct them from learning, and then we could really go to town. So again, if you can find it, if one of you can find it and would be willing to share that data with me, with your name off it and the school's name off it as well, that would be great. Okay. Now, I only have one thing I just want to show you for a moment. So I'm going to, for the moment, stop this share and then bring up the one slide PowerPoint. Oh, one here. Where is it? It's over here. Here we go. This is really about the goal for this particular day, particular content in terms of the 2 books we're working through. It's going to be the quickest PowerPoint you're ever going to see. This is goal 1 for tonight's for the rest of what we're talking about today. And the question is, how do teacher salaries, planning time, professional development, and collaboration in schools influence teacher quality? Please use readings of week 4 to assist with your answer. I don't think I asked the question properly in journal, so I may have to change that. But right now, you can see a little Venn diagram. I just wanted to show you the intersection between among salaries, PD, professional development, collaboration, and planning. Now, last week we used Senge's words. We used the 5 disciplines. I'm going to equate these for you. I'm going to equate 3 of them. Professional development, if we're looking at Senge and the 5 systems disciplines, is about personal mastery. Collaboration is about team learning. And planning is about systems thinking, or futuring. Futuring is a little different than systems thinking, but the same idea connects. Salaries is a different animal. So the question then becomes, when you put these all together, well, we don't have planning time. Oh, we have plan here. Okay. When we talk about teacher salaries, planning time, PD, and collaboration, absent these things, or with deficiencies in any of these, how will it contribute or not contribute to the quality of what the teacher's about? How hard is that to answer? You know the answer to that. They've got to get a lot of love from the principal, the chair, to make this happen. I took over a building, and I think I've told you before, I took over an elementary building a long time ago. I'm smiling because it was the best time of my professional life. I took over an elementary building, and the first thing I did was redo the schedule. Now, understand that writing a schedule, conceiving of a schedule, and I did it by myself. After the first year, I did it with my staff, is a lesson in values. Because how you set up the schedule explains the values and the beliefs of the building. I'll give you a high school example for a second. High school principal has to set up a curriculum, usually, or rather a schedule, and usually they use computers nowadays to do it, which I think is a mistake, but understandably, they do use computers to get it done. And one of the first things that would happen, bet your mortgage on this, is the coaches come in, say, Mrs. Smith, we got to get in period 9 off. The last, you got to get me off. I got to get into the locker room, make sure all the football equipment's lined up, or the showers are hot, or whichever it is, they think they need to do. I need that period. So the principal adjusts the schedule. So Coach Jones gets the 9th period off, which means that Mrs. Smith, who's teaching 5 classes back to back, somehow has to have her schedule and adjusted to keep the coach happy, because the values of the building are keep the athletics happy. Hear me on these things, because this is the complicated Rubik's Cube approach as such. The other side of the coin was, I'm going to get in trouble for what I'm going to say. I would have a new mom come in to see me, a teacher who had just become a mom. And she would say, next year's course.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Could you give me first period off so I can come in late because I got to get the babies on the bus, or I get the babies to daycare. And you want to be a good person, you want to develop a human relationship values. Yeah, it's a tough one. That one I respect more than the coach has to get the showers hot. But in the end, what you're doing is you're trying to transactionally work with, and hear that word transactionally, trade one for the other in order to get the whole building to fit together. And what you're doing is you are, pardon the verb, messing with the plans of the building. You're messing with the systems. The systems become in conflict unless you're really careful about how you handle that. Collaboration, clear enough. Well, I started to say when I became the principal, the first thing I did was I did the schedule, and I had all the second grade teachers have the same prep day time, 3rd grade, that kind of thing. And I would call one grade level meeting a month. And they were absolutely flabbergasted. They didn't know what to say to each other, how to share with each other, how they could support each other. It was foreign country to them. I had to teach them how to learn, how to collaborate with each other. They weren't used to it. The culture wasn't there for it. Once they got going, it was great, but it was difficult. Then every once in a while, I have a 2nd and 3rd grade meeting, a 1st and a 2nd, and a 4th and a 5th. They have people talk to each other about the spiraling of curriculum. And I literally had probably the best teacher in the school come in and see me, say to me, "You're too much like a secondary person." And I would get very sensitive about that because I was most of my career in secondary. And I said, "What do you mean by that?" And she would say, "Well, we only care about our own class. We don't care about the class that came before, fed these kids to us. And we don't really care what happens when they go to the next class." And I just I had hair then, and I just shook my head, and my hair fell into my beady little eyes. And I was, "You kidding? That's how you think?" Because that was an example of a lack of shared vision. As good as this teacher was, she was basically saying, "Hey, I'm taking care of my own business, not anybody else's." That's scary. So yes, if these features are, I'm leaving salaries out for a moment. If these features aren't in place, you are in trouble, right? So now the salaries thing is interesting because salaries is about motivation. And I don't know if I had said it to you. I know I said it to one of my classes a couple of weeks ago. If we doubled your salary, you couldn't work twice as hard because you're working pretty much a maximum now. How can we double your salary and give you that much more money? It's not happening. Salaries is not a motivator. I take that back. Salaries is a short-term, by research, is a short-term motivator. It's not a long-term motivator. If you want a long-term sustainable culture, you can't count on the salaries to have it happen. And by that, you can also throw in teacher benefits and whatnot. And all those things are short-term motivators. And you can't keep those things in place because transactionally, you can only do so many things with that. So, with that, I'm going to take this PowerPoint out. I just want you to see the interaction of the diagram. And we'll go back to the lesson plan. But Fullen talks about the 5 C's, and that's just probably his thing he's most famous for as far as this book is concerned. It talks about capacity. We've mentioned that word 100 times already. If you're writing an action plan about building a multi-age school to meet the needs of ENL children, what capacity do these teachers need? What do they need? What muscles do they need to have? What endurance do they need to have? How are you going to make them Super Bowl winners? What about their skills and their dispositions? How do you enable them to develop them of themselves and then to share them and strengthen them among each other? That's about capacity. And Fullen goes on to talk about commitment, which is about shared vision. I like this word that I used, a collegial embrace, supported by positive conditions. The more positive the conditions I make, the more I set up a situation where they need to speak to each other. For the most part, you're going to get good collegiality and commitment among each other. And then you need to recognize too, and I don't like this C, but I have to acknowledge it. And there are phases of teachers. I think about it. I'm not sure how long any of you have been teaching. The ones I read about from the discussion boards were all, most of you were no more than 10 years of teaching. Maybe some of you were less than that. Maybe a couple others were a little more than that. According to Fullen and Hargraves, you're in one of different phases. Right now, you're probably, I'm going to guess, into efficacy and maybe managing changes. You need to read that chapter more carefully and look at that figure 4.1 on page 54 to understand how you can't keep that up for a 30-year teacher. It doesn't work that way. And what a better model of teaching would be to have what's called career ladders, where the senior teachers, not necessarily if they're burning out or, all those words you hear about so often, where the more senior teachers become coaches and mentors to the younger ones, help them get better at what they do, share their expertise, develop new expertise with each other and among themselves. That's the only way to keep a school continuing to grow as such. Culture, we talked about, and we'll continue to talk about, that has to be in your multi-age classroom plan. What are you going to do about assuring yourselves that you have a culture where the basic assumptions and beliefs are clear, strong, and positive? How are you going to do that? And believe it or not, you got to consider the context. I call it the world out there. What's going on in the world out there now? What happens in suburban areas? I don't know about the city. So if you're in the city now, I apologize. Well, the bulk of my professional career has been in the suburbs, so I apologize for that. But I think you can see where I'm coming from. In a suburb, the big thing is right now, this is going to be February. Right now, it's budget time. And the budget is steered by the community, and the community votes yay or nay on the budget. And if they vote nay, it seriously puts handcuffs on the ability of the district to meet the needs of the kids, unless people get very creative or very cheap about what they do for those same children. So that world out there cannot be forgotten about. I'm going to give you a diagram to help you realize that how the world's changing so rapidly, and there's so many facets of what that's about. You need to take care of that. Now, Fullen goes on to brag about Toronto, Canada, where he is from, where they were so upset about the condition of the schools about 20 years ago, maybe more than that now, that the government stepped in and totally restructured the public school system. No, they didn't go to charter schools. They restructured the public school system from front to back, where they emphasized teacher quality and teacher professionalism, but they only hired the best and the brightest. where went to the colleges and showed them what they wanted in terms of rigorous preparation of new teachers, with plenty of experiences for them to have. Think about how you would how you were trained to be a teacher, or if you were. Did you get experiential approaches? Maybe in an internship at the end of your semester. Which, by the way, reminds me, you have to fill out an internship chart for me. I just remembered that. I'll come back to that next week. One point I like to Full and Hugger say is that you need to train everybody to be leaders. You know, the things that you're learning in this class right now, and the other classes you've had in this program, don't necessarily, it's not a secret language. It's not as if only you leaders with stripes on their shoulder have the right to know some of these things. That's ridiculous. Why not have everybody learn how to be leaders in their own way? When you bring new teachers in, you have a whole induction program to train them and mentor them. I'm just thinking of myself for a minute. Quick war story, very quick. I remember I walked into my building first year I taught, all before any of you were born, and I said to the principal, "What do I need to know?" Something like that. And he gave me the yellow textbook. He says, "Here it is. That's the curriculum." That was my induction. That was it. I didn't know where the men's. I was using the boys' room for a week before one of the other teachers said, "There's a faculty room around the other side of the hallway." I didn't even know that. So I mean, that's how bad the induction was. That I survived that first few years was a lot. Mentors, unofficially, yes, benefited greatly from some real angels who help people, but everyone's entitled to those kind of things. And when you get observed, I don't know if I said it to this class or not, but it's worth repeating. The most important course you're taking in this program, even more important than this course, and I don't say that lightly, is how to supervise teachers, your teachers, how to nurture and train them to be the best teachers they can be, not just to walk in and find out what they didn't do right. That doesn't train anybody. And to recognize them too, as far as you can. All right, so we're going to take it from there and leave it at that. And I think that you've got plenty of material here. Everything you do from this point on, especially as you look at the COSA book, is to think about, how would I do this? How would my plan look like? There is a template in the appendix. I think it's Appendix B in her book. The one I'm going to give you is going to be more complex than that, because the one I'm going to give you is going to absolutely prepare you for the certification exam. Okay. So I think we've got plenty of things to do. You know what you have to do in terms of assignments for this week coming. And if you have any questions, just reach out. Take care.